Skipper the Nanday Conure, who is going to have their foster Sarah speaking. Oh, and he is asleep in his bell.
Hi, Robin. He's not quite asleep, but he's working on it.
He's thinking about it. So what can you tell us about Skipper?
Skipper is a Nanday Conure. He's about 15 years old, and he was living with a male owner who unfortunately got sick earlier this year and was hospitalized. And we were contacted by a friend of the owner because it was becoming clear that the owner's health was deteriorating. So they asked if we would be able to take him in. Unfortunately, the owner did pass away, and so this friend temporarily held Skipper until we were able to come and pick him up. He's about 15 years old, which is not old for a conure, but I do affectionately kind of describe him as sort of an old grumpy guy. He has just, we are celebrating today. I think this is officially the end of Skipper's quarantine. He just finished 6 weeks here. So it's still relatively early days getting to know him, but there's a few likes and dislikes we've already figured out, and certainly some habits that we've definitely become very familiar with.
Like sitting under bells? Is that his favorite toy right there?
Yes, this is one of Skipper's favorite pastimes. He, as many conures do, he has a great affection for bells, and sitting with a bell on his head as a hat is his favorite way to relax. So you do have to be careful, just a caveat with these jingle bell shaped bells. They can be a little bit dangerous. Skipper has chewed out the ringer from one of these, and you need to be very careful that they don't get their beaks trapped in the piece that remains. So, tube bells are much safer, and I may work over time to transfer Skipper's love of bells to tube ones, which are a bit safer. But in the meantime, he's got his bell hat, and I don't think I can bring myself to deprive him of it completely, because as you can see, it's his happy place.
Oh yeah, that he's having the time of his life right in there.
Oh, he's so happy.
Oh yeah. So what is Skipper's diet like?
Skipper's diet is not too bad. He is on rowdy bush pellets, and he's been accepting those. He takes a medium and the size one down from that. We put a mix of those in his dish. He's a really good eater of rowdy bush pellets. He's just been pigging out on them the whole time we've been setting up. In the last hour, he's been scarfing down his breakfast. So that's probably why he's taking a nap right now, because he's got a crop full of rowdy bush and he's pretty content. But yeah, he's pretty good. He also really loves berries and fruits. He's eaten some vegetables. I usually serve veggies around lunchtime, so he hasn't got his serving today yet, but he does show interest and will pick through. He definitely starts with his favorite fruit, so he does love little pieces of orange slices, and he's definitely eaten small chunks of apple. The veggies, it's kind of hit and miss. He'll take one bite out of a green leaf and then throw the rest on the floor.
You said he was an old man, but it sounds like he's a little kid.
I think all parrots are pretty picky when it comes to, if there's enough food abundant, then they will just pick out what they want. So yeah, he does eat fresh produce, which is the good part. And I think with a little bit of work, you could get him to explore more of it.
He's at least willing to try. So is he hand tame or well socialized or anything like that? Does he get along with people really?
He definitely appreciates ambient company, and he will talk to you if you talk to him in the typical Nanday squeak. It does feel a bit like he's yelling at you at times, but I think that is a little bit the Nanday style. He knows how to step up, and when pushed, he will step up for me, but it's kind of 50-50 whether he'll step up for me or protest and use his beak to tell me no thank you. He's definitely not aggressive, but like all parrots, he's got opinions about what he wants to do and when. And so if he's not in the mood to step up, he'll use his beak to kind of nip your finger or push you away. And you can tell from his body language, he starts reversing away from you. He just doesn't want to step up right now.
Doing quite the squeak and wiggle right now.
If I'm holding a treat in my other hand and I offer my hand as a perch to get to the food, he will step up quite happily. And then you can kind of hold him for a little bit whilst he eats, and then he wants to go back in his cage again. He's not shown that much interest in exploring outside of his cage. He's climbed out of it all of maybe 2 or 3 times. So I think that's something to work on with him, just getting him to not be such a perch potato, move around more. We will transfer him out of this cage. This is the cage that he came in from his past life. The bar gauge in it is really not ideal for conures. It barely meets our cage size recommendations. And so we're going to work on getting more natural shaped perches in there and some more swings and a wider 30-inch cage. So now that his quarantine is over, we can start to transfer him into something that's more of a flight cage space, which hopefully he will make good use of and not just nap under his bells all day, but we'll see.
I'm not sure I would bet against that. We have a question from the audience. Are conures, and I guess Skipper specifically, food motivated?
Oh, I think every pirate on the planet is food motivated. But I would say yes, Skipper is food motivated. One of the times he came out of his cage was when I hadn't quite got 3 bowl holders set up in his cage. It was fairly early on, so I had to remove his pellets in order to put in his fruits and veggies at lunchtime. But I took the pellet bowl and I put it on the table next to his cage so he could still see it, which wasn't deliberate, but that was just where it was. And Skipper was eyeballing it from inside his cage and decided to tentatively climb out and around his cage and then reach out to the table and stretch all the way, elongating his body as long as he could make it to see if he could reach the table and get to his precious pellets instead of having to eat more vegetables. And the fact that he'll step up for you if you're holding a treat, I think suggests he is definitely food motivated. And I think if you did a bit of clicker training with him every day using modest sized treats for 5 minutes a day, you could make leaps and bounds pretty rapidly with him.
We've got actually a whole bunch of questions. How loud are Nanday conures? And I will actually clarify, just because they said specifically conures. Conures come in varying volume levels, but they are all various shades of loud. So how is Skipper specifically?
Skipper specifically, as a Nanday, he's got a pretty high pitch squeak. You've heard it a couple of times now. He'll have a little moment if someone new walks into the room or talks to him, or if you kind of start changing stuff up in his cage. I was wiping down the perches earlier and he was telling me exactly what he thought of that. So that's a pretty high pitched squeak, which some people find a little bit too ear piercing. It's higher than the squeak of cherry heads or other larger conures. But most of the day he's pretty content to just hang out on his swing. You can see the penthouse suite swing upstairs at the top of his cage there. He likes to climb up there, or nap under his bell hat. He's got a couple of palm shredder style toys, which I've had to move so that you can see him right now in the view. That there's a couple of toys which are normally at the front of his cage, and he loves chewing on those. They're half destroyed at this point. We're going to need to replace them, but they're the Planet Pleasure style palm shredder chew toys.
That's fantastic. We want to see those toys getting destroyed.
Yeah. It's his favorite hobby besides the bells. So he's most of the day he makes these tiny little squeaks like he's doing right now, and just chews on his toys and is pretty chill. But he'll have a moment if something spooks him or if he just decides to get vocal because it's time for dinner. And then it's a higher end squeak routine that he has. It's this little rhythmical beep 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 that kind of just goes on and on and on for a few minutes, and then he'll get over it.
How is Skipper with other birds, if you know?
Well, he's been in quarantine here, so we haven't really had any opportunity to explore that. I will be moving him downstairs soon, so maybe we'll be able to update his profile shortly. But that's hard to say.
It definitely seems like he's calling back to someone he can hear.
Yeah, I mean, if he makes these kind of beep noises, like beep, like he's doing right now, beep, and if you go beep back at him, and then he goes beep back at you, and you go beep back at him, it's the closest he does to talking. It's very gravelly, and pretty quiet. And then you get the squeaky ones like that.
Oh yeah, and lots of stretches, and his feathers look a little bit ragged. Is he molting right now?
He's been through a really big molt. When he first came here, he had a lot of pin feathers, and he was really I think he has problems getting to his tail. I don't know if you can see, but he's got two enormous pin
Yeah, I can
feathers,
see them
tail
right now.
feathers. Yeah,
The big white things.
they're almost entirely unpreened. When he first came here, he had so many pin feathers that when I was setting him up and getting him out of his travel cage, I did hold him in a towel and I worked on a lot of his pin feathers because I thought that would make him feel better. But he, I think, felt slightly like I had invaded his personal space, and was not very happy about me being around for a little while after that. So I am giving him a lot of space now. And as a result, he has stepped up for me a few times unprompted. But it does mean that all those pin feathers are just sitting there. I don't think he can reach them. And at some point, I'd like to get those opened up for him. But I
not as flexible as a spring chicken might be.
no.
So before we move on to our next bird, do you have any fun stories about Skipper?
Well, besides his adorable affection for bell hats, which has already prompted some fan art, which is wonderful and will be part of our upcoming auction next month. He did just unprompted one day. He's very close to my desk up here. And I often sit with the cage door open, just hanging out with him. And unprompted one day, he just decided to fly out of the cage onto my desk, pooped on my keyboard, and then squeaked at me, asking to be picked up and taken back to his cage, all in the space of about a minute. So he knows how to fly, but his motivation to do so is perhaps a little bit more limited than it could be. So
a little bit more spiteful, even.
Exercise might be fun.
He's all right.
Fun guy.
Thank you very much, Sarah.